Marcus Garvey saying, "Take us back to Africa." We had folks like Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King and Malcolm X saying, "By any means necessary." Those legacies continue to live with us each day that we create new initiatives and new opportunities, and we can never forget that. A few years ago, I had the privilege of going to Egypt, which represents another part of the African diaspora that's often forgotten. But it's where all of our legacies have started. And if you have not gone, I implore you to go back. I also had the privilege of going to Ghana. And I know that Ghana is represented right alongside Cameroon, who had their earlier shout out, right? And I know that one of the lessons of going to Ghana was the reminder of Sankofa and the fact that you cannot know where you're going until you have gone back and understood from whence you've come. I know also that when I come to these occasions that my voice is not just the voice of the young, it's also the voice of the poor. I grew up in poverty, and my legacy and my family was one that was really shaped by mental illness, by substance use, by being in dilapidated housing conditions that many of us struggle with, right, living here in the U.S. One of the richest countries in the world, and yet still the dichotomy of the greatly impoverished amongst us. So when I speak about the work and the partnership that we look forward to having with Power African Youth, I speak from the perspective that these are the times when we have to keep assuring that Black lives matter, right? And Black lives don't just matter when it comes to forums and places where our faces are needed, but Black lives matter when we also put resources and money behind the efforts that we're trying to advance, right? And so when I think about some of the nuggets that continue to be with me, and I'm leaving this just as inspiration and food for you, I think about those rich proverbs that I pulled out this morning, just a few to share, because no matter how many generations pass, they still are with us, guiding forces in everything that we do. And so whether it's Cameroon or Ghana or the others that are represented here, I think of Swahili. There's a proverb that says, "Wisdom is wealth." And here today, the gathering of this information is an education for us, but an education to take back out to our communities. I also am reminded of the proverb from Somali that says, "Wisdom does not come overnight." So for our young people, I want you to be, vigilant and to have urgency and to know that we don't have to wait to the future to have your leadership, but I also want you to color that with the balance of knowing that wisdom does not come overnight. I also know that the proverb from Nigeria that talks about when you're in a moment of crisis, the wise build bridges, not dams. Don't burn your bridges, build them, and don't let barriers stop you, but also be mindful of all of those around you. Part of the Borough President's administration has been about access. So we recently opened a new storefront office on 125th Street in the center of Harlem. You know that Harlem and the Bronx, I'm originally from the Bronx and have come to Harlem, are both meccas for Africans in New York City. And that storefront is different than any other elected because it's the first time a borough president has ever had a storefront that you can walk in off of the streets, not go up into buildings with metal detectors and many floors to find the maze of how do you find that person that represents you. So we welcome you into that storefront between Amsterdam and Morningside on 125th Street at any time. We recently held a number of African initiatives. And I tell you this because those are things that can enable you to access our office and the other offices of various other administrations that have the resources and supports you're looking for. One of those collaborators was our friends at Go Africa Network. I know that some of them are here today, and I just want to acknowledge them for their great work and bringing a community festival to the 116th Street area in Harlem, which is right up the block from many of the businesses that we know are African owned. We recently also worked with the African Hair Braiders, which many of you know it's another entrepreneurial opportunity for our many sisters who are trying to make ends meet. But it's also a part of our culture that's been sacred for so long. And so we're working with them in the Department of State to build the capacity of these businesses and natural hairstylists so that they can take that to another level, remove the burdens, the obstacles from their path. We are also continuing to work with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs to deal with the issue of immigration and accessing services such as you've heard that we all have these IDNYC cards now. Many of us are starting to get them. If you haven't gotten them, they've been advocated and promoted as another vehicle for having ID that gives you access to many services and resources throughout New York City. But there are still fears around having those IDs, right? People fear deportation. They fear that this information is going to be misused in a way that misrepresents them, or that they will be held accountable for things that ordinarily, if folks didn't have access to them, they wouldn't be able to, right? So we have to get rid of the misunderstanding around some of those resources that actually can build greater access. We also have an African Immigrant Task Force, okay? And why is this important? Because that task force, coupled with the Borough President's Youth Council, are both two unique places that the voices of Africans in the diaspora that are here in the U.S. need to be heard. It's okay to start and establish yourselves with groups like PAY, but you also have to be seated at the tables where decisions are being made from the perspective of those who are in leadership here in New York City. And so two of those places are our Youth Council as well as this African Immigrant Task Force. When the issue of Ebola came last year, we did a huge conference at City College and mobilized hundreds of Africans and those in the community who were committed to working with us and health officials to really promote what prevention needed to happen to help people avoid the consequences of Ebola. But we also strategized with groups like the West Harlem Development Corporation and others, some from Liberia, to really talk about how do we take our resources and help in addition to gathering and communicating with each other. We also are proud to say that another opportunity for PAY is working with us around vendors. African vendors are a unique and important force in this economy in the U.S. Many of them are, as you know, used to going and bringing their wares and goods to be sold in the market. Well, we're in the markets here, right? And if there are not supports for those groups in marketplaces, then many of them will feel displaced or like they don't have the opportunity to sell their goods and their wares. We have to continue to make sure that they can get the licenses that they need, temporary or otherwise, so that they can continue to use that as part of the economy. I know that there's lots more that I can continue to tell you about. I'm excited for this, and I won't take up the rest of your day. But I really could talk with you all day because our community is so phenomenal in that way. And I just finished watching Black Girls Rock. Any of you follow me on that? These are young people now. And if you haven't followed that, you've been on Twitter, maybe Instagram, or some of the other communities like Facebook and YouTube. We actually just did our Women's History Month event at YouTube, right? Because these are the mediums that our young people and our new business entrepreneurs are communicating through. And so technology has to be a part of this conversation. The small business forum that we held recently built upon the need to give capital and access to technology and resources to communities such as yours. We have resources and reports and flyers and all kinds of things that we've brought with us today, but we're not going anywhere. We'll be here with you. So if you have questions, if you want to bridge, we will be here to do that. And finally, we have grant programs that give access to communities to apply for grants through the Borough President's Office. We have community boards, which are represented in the 12 community boards across Manhattan, all of which we have about 600 community board members. And we need your voices. If it's no folks of color in the room, when decisions are being made around affordable housing, where businesses get licenses or permits for various things, or economic development that's happening, and your voices are not there, you cannot turn to your leadership and your other stakeholders and say, where's the money? You have to be part of the process from the beginning of the process. So I just want to say thank you this morning to Makinda, thank you to Rodney for coming to meet with us at our office. And we are standing with you because we believe not only in what you've said, but the actions you've demonstrated through this conference today, and then some. We look forward to continuing to work with you.